episode 31 of Smash TV. Man, it seems so long ago when I turned 31, the dreaded third daughter life where I almost immediately got a dad bod and stepped into my fourth midlife crisis. It seemed like the end of the good times that were my 20s. Now I'm much older and looking back from this post-apocalyptic hellhole I can only imagine, what if? What? I hear you thinking, is Robotron from the future? Well, who knows? I'm not telling you at the moment. Have we ever heard from robots coming from the future to warn mankind? Ask yourself what I do here with all my fame and millions. Horny bitches on every corner screaming for me. What am I doing here? Reviewing movies for you. Time will reveal all. Now on to the movies. Venom, Let There Be Carnage is the second Venom movie our corporate stooges has given us. And luckily it's once again a Sony movie rather than a Marvel/Disney movie, which would probably have made Venom a second character in his own movie and a strong woman as frontrunner, you know? Kinda like in the first Venom movie for a bit. As the title suggests, Let There Be Carnage brings out one of the other villains in the Venom lore called Carnage, played by Woody Harrelson, who is hunting down Venom and Eddie Brock, played again by Tom Hardy, for ruining his life behind bars. With a villain like Venom you would think that this would be pretty violent, but it's actually less violent than the first one. There's often talk about biting off heads, but it doesn't really happen. There's a lot of humor and that's all fine and dandy, but the longer the movie runs the less you feel like this is a good coherent movie. I'm thinking that this is a great movie for kids were it not that Venom visually is such a scary character. For adults, however, the humor is a little bit too simple, but one would expect more action and violence. Overall, the movie is saved for not being very long, and the charisma of Tom Hardy and Venom makes up for a lot. The final battle scene is a little bit meh in my opinion, but hey, it's at least not a completely crappy movie propped with propaganda and hot talking points like Black Lives and feminism. Venom is fun. If fun is a vanilla ice cream with a cone that tastes a little bit like cardboard. Check that. Cold Souls is one of those Hollywood movies that portray more about Hollywood than one would expect. At least Hollywood from the memes of religious conspiracy theorists who think the devil is real and we're all in a large war for souls. In Cold Souls, Paul Giamatti plays an actor called Paul Giamatti who is having difficulty playing a part in a play. To make sure he gets better, he decides to extract his soul and have it kept in some kind of containment field. Of course, things don't appear to be all that great without a soul, and he goes to search for a new soul that can give him what he wants. Unfortunately, other people make a living off this stuff too, making it all even more difficult. Cold Souls feels like one of those movies where the creators and actors were sniffing each other's farts while making it. It's a little bit pretentious in using actual actors and their names as characters, and it does tell a tale about how actors, for real or not, kinda have to sell their soul in order to become someone else. This is one of those movies you can look at through different lenses and find another explanation for it. It's well shot, well acted, and interesting enough to keep you watching for its duration. Having the lovely Catherine Winnick in it also helps, even though she doesn't have that many lines in it. Check that. Goodbye Lenin is a lovely German film about an East German family whose mother goes into a coma right before the fall of the Berlin Wall in 1989. When she wakes 9 months later, the chance of a new heart attack is too severe, and the son decides to pretend that they are still living in the communist state that was East Germany. Goodbye Lenin is a lovely film that shows us glimpses of what the world was for people in East Germany during the Soviet occupation and how it all changed when the West and its capital marched in. We've seen glimpses like this in series like Deutschland, but this movie is much more comedic than that show. The film loses a little bit of momentum a third in as the attempt of the son makes it more difficult to hide the truth, but thankfully there's enough to have you watch the end of it, though I wish the ending was a little bit different. Not due to the way it ends, but how they decided to convey the ending to us. Check out Goodbye Lenin if you want to look into the past a little bit and have some feels. Smash that. Feelings. Feelings are real. You'll feel feelings watching this film, unless you're a cold-hearted brute, which will probably make this movie less interesting for you. Or maybe not. cause it has plenty to go for. The Champ tells the story of single dad Billy Flynn, played by Jon Voight, and his son TJ. Billy is a former boxer and quite the deadbeat, often gambling and drinking while taking care of his son whom he loves to death. Don't expect a guy being angry and mean on his sofa. No, Billy knows what he does wrong and the love for his son makes him move mountains. But as emotions flare and life hits us over and over, it becomes hard. The way of a boxer: get hit, fall down, get up, every day. There's so much stuff that happens in this movie that will force you to get some kind of tissue that I would suggest having a box ready before you start it. Good stuff, bad stuff, happy stuff, sad stuff. There's so many tear-jerk moments it left my cheeks irritated from the tears I shed. The acting from all involved, including the kids, is excellent as they switch happiness and hardship between scenes and events. Overall, it's not only the story about a man down on his luck, a single dad, taking responsibility even when the going gets tough, being a father, being a mother, being a kid. The Champ is truly a wonderful movie, but don't expect that it will stay in your memory as something fond. Well, in a way it does, as only through pain can you experience true happiness. Smash that. Movies from the former Eastern Bloc are quite special, and so is Marketa Lazarova, a beautifully shot black and white movie set in medieval times about a woman, Marketa, the daughter of a feudal lord and wannabe nun, who gets kidnapped by some robbers and has to endure some hardships during her captivity. She eventually becomes the mistress of one of the robbers, but her father is chasing the abductors in order to free his daughter. Marketa Lazarova is considered the best Czech film ever made and the best film directed by Frantiering !!!!!!!!!!!!!!!!!!!!!!!!!!!!!!!!!!!!!!!!!!!!!!!!!!!!!!!!!!!!!!!!!!!!!!!!!!!!!!!!!!!!!!!!!!!!!!!!!!!!!!!!!!!!!!!!!!!!!!!!!!!!!!!!!!!!!!!!!!!!!!!!!!!!!!!!!!!!!!!!!!!!!!!!!!!!!!!!!!!!!!!!!!!!!!!!!!!!!!!!!!!!!!!!!!!!!!!!!!!!!!!!!!!!!!!!!!!!!!!!!!!!!!!!!!!!!!!!!!!!!!!!!!!!!!!!!!!!!!!!!!!!!!!!!!!!!!!!!!!!!!!!!!!!!!!!!!!!!!!!!!!!!!!!!!!!!!!!!!!!!!!!!!!!!!!!!!!!!!!!!!!!!!!!!!!!!!!!!!!!!!! everyone. It's very artsy and extremely Eastern Bloc. Everything is cold and almost feels depressingly soulless. People are hard. What happens is hard. The crisp black and white is hard, and you have an almost constant choir of not so angelic voices chanting throughout what happens. The voices seem disconnected at times and not part of the movie, making it all feel quite esoteric at the times. Luckily it's less heavy than the Russian black and white movie set in medieval times called Hard to Be a God, which with its 3-hour length was a bit harder to get through. Marketa Lazarova only lasts 2 hours and 42 minutes and is much easier to swallow than Hard to Be God. Marketa Lazarova is a must-see classic, if only because it has been deemed as such. You can see the expertise and craft that went into this movie, and the story is compelling enough. It's however a far cry away from what we Western audiences are usually used to, so be forewarned that this is one of those movies they could have shown you in school with a long thesis to hear afterwards. Check that. Sword of the Conqueror is an Italian epic set in the 7th century about a cruel Lombard ruler called Alboino, played by the iconic Jack Palance, who wishes to marry the daughter of a rival king. She however is in love with someone else and does not want to marry him back. This of course angers the man, and he does some very awful things in the name of love. How long will she and the population accept this? Find out and see in Sword of the Conqueror, an adeptly made movie in the same style of the 300 Spartans and Ben-Hur, although a wee bit less epic than the American counterparts, mainly cause this is, of course, an Italian movie. There's plenty of large-scale battles however, and the scenery is quite majestic, so the creators of this movie should not feel bad that they couldn't go even bigger. The story is interesting in itself, but the stern acting of most of the cast is a little bit outdated, though common for the time it was made in. It's very dramatic and gloriously old-fashioned, but you can see the ending come from a mile away. Due to many talkative scenes in the movie, there's a little bit too much balance in this action versus plot type of balance, which makes this movie a bit forgettable in the long run despite how competently made it is. Sword of the Conqueror is okay, but it didn't conquer my heart as well as others did. Check that. Endgame. also known as Bronx Lotta Finale, isn't a sequel to another movie like I first thought, but a standalone film about post-nuclear New York where mutants roam the street, and a yearly contest called Endgame is televised in order to keep the population subdued. Champion of previous Endgame's battles against rivals for the title until he gets recruited by a bunch of mutants with psychic powers with the request to bring them to safety. He makes a team and heads out, battling enemies, themselves, the state, troopers and more. Endgame is a movie that hitched on the popularity of Mad Max but differentiates itself by adding post-apocalyptic New York to the mix. No desert sands, no drought but wet ugly nastiness combined with rubber armor and metal SS helmets. Modern post-apocalyptic gladiator fights with guns and a couple of lasers. Religious damsels in distress, some boobage, some rampage, a lot of killing, just good fun. Bronx Lotta Finale is one of those delightful VHS movies you would see in the story with an awesome cover, and unlike many movies of that ilk, this actually delivers, at least up to a point, cause let's face it, this is B-movie material right here. Great B-movie material but still B-movie. Stick around though, you won't regret it. Check that. A young couple needs some help with the baby and decide to hire a nanny to take care of their child. Of course they hire an extremely beautiful and mysterious woman who, you guessed it, might not be as good of a guardian as she pretends to be. Oh, and druids. The Guardian is one of the few William Friedkin movies I've seen that doesn't work for me. The concept is interesting but the execution lacks the typical Friedkin vibe I always enjoy in his other movies. The movie is competently made but I think it's a little bit low on the horror scale and underutilized the plot about druids and all the shenanigans they get up to apparently. There's some cool scenes however, and it's not a bad movie, but knowing what he did with The Exorcist he could have gone much further with this. Overall I'd recommend watching this movie when you're in the mood for a novel easygoing horror movie, but this is definitely not Friedkin's best work in my humble opinion. Check that. In Gestapo's last orgy we will experience the Gestapo having their final orgy. Well, not really, maybe a little bit. In this movie we follow Liz Cohen, who revisits the ruins of a concentration camp she, and others, were kept at, tortured and abused for years by Nazis and their sympathizers. And she does this with Conrad von Stark, the big bad of that camp with whom she developed an affair during her stay. Mostly told as a flashback, we witness plenty of sexual orgies and other debauchery that only true baddies like the Nazis could imagine. There's even a scene where they, oh, okay, I won't spoil it, but it made me a little bit sick to the stomach. Pun intended. This Nazi-exploitation has all the hallmarks of other movies in this genre. Busty blonde women, rapage, torture, maniacal laughing, evil women, evil men, crying, screaming, boobs, butts, and much more. If you saw any of these movies you probably saw them all. There are some scenes so similar to others that it feels like a reboot, but of course it's not. Gestapo's Last Orgy isn't the worst movie in the Nazi-exploitation genre, but that isn't saying much. Only for those who like the genre. Check that. The Last Days of Pompeii is a 1935 movie about, you guessed it, the last days of Pompeii. You'll be surprised however that most of the movie depicted doesn't happen in those last days. No, we get to see the story of Marcus, a loving husband and father who works as a blacksmith. He gets dealt some heavy cards for a decision he made, after which he throws away his morals and becomes a corrupt gladiator and more. Classic movies used to not only tell a story but also warn the viewer with some kind of message, and the message in this movie is quite clear. It becomes even more clear when we are shown glimpses of a certain famous person who lived in Jerusalem at one point in time. He pops up several times, not shown and alluded to, not to make the story all about him. The Last Days of Pompeii is a classic movie in all the senses of the word. It's quite wholesome, it has a message, has a bombastic score underneath the action and acting. It has a distinct vibe reminding me of my childhood. Suffice to say that I'm quite fond of this era of movie history, and I'm glad to say that The Last Days of Pompeii is a very enjoyable movie. Don't be scared of the black and white film. nor the fact it's almost a century old. Movies like this should be cherished and remembered, maybe even aspired to once again. Smash that. Sorry about that long-winded intro. I know you are all here for some light-hearted movie recommendations, but sometimes my mouth gets the better of me. Don't worry about that post-apocalyptic hellhole though. Things aren't set in stone. We changed the future many times. How else do you think we came to live in this clown world, huh? It's not an exact science, you know. Exact science. Oh, the irony. Anyways, see you next time.